The crosshairs trembled against the horizon as Emily Whitaker studied her breathing, watching the impossible target through her rifle scope. 3 miles away, a distance that defied every training manual, every record in military history, a terrorist leader emerged from a concrete bunker, unaware that an 18-year-old girl from rural Montana was about to rewrite the rules of warfare forever. "Target acquired," Emily whispered into her radio, her voice barely audible over the howling Afghan wind. The spotter beside her, Sergeant Mason, lowered his binoculars with shaking hands. "Emily," Mason muttered, his weathered face creased with disbelief. "That's not a shot, that's a prayer. Winds gusting at 40+, temperature differential throwing off every calculation, and you're talking about a 3-mile kill shot with a .338 Lapua Magnum when the world record is barely past a mile and a half." Emily's finger found the trigger, her pulse steady despite the magnitude of what she was attempting. Below them, scattered across the valley floor, 3 different terrorist cells had converged for what intelligence indicated was a major weapons exchange. The target, Abdul Rahman, architect of 17 bombing attacks across 3 countries, stood in the center of it all, believing himself untouchable at this distance. "Command, this is Overwatch 7, Emily spoke into her headset, never taking her eye from the scope, requesting permission to engage primary target at extreme range. Static crackled through her earpiece before Colonel Sarah Hayes's voice cut through. "Whitaker, confirm your range estimation. 4,800 meters, ma'am. Wind south-southeast at 42 knots, gusting to 55. Temperature differential calculated at -34 degrees Celsius. Coriolis effect compensation already dialed in for this hemisphere." A long pause, then, "Whitaker, that exceeds maximum effective range by over 2 miles. No military sniper in history has made a confirmed kill beyond 2,700 meters." Emily's jaw tightened. She'd spent the last 6 months analyzing every long-range engagement record, studying trajectory calculations until her eyes burned, and practicing on targets most seasoned snipers wouldn't attempt. Her instructors called her obsessed, her fellow recruits called her crazy, but lying here on this rocky outcrop, watching history unfold through her rifle scope, Emily knew this moment had been inevitable since the day she first picked up a rifle. "Ma'am, with respect," she replied, "no 18-year-old girl from Montana has ever been deployed to Afghanistan either, but here we are." 6 months earlier, Emily Whitaker had been stacking hay bales under the endless Montana sky, her rifle propped against a fence post as she took aim at prairie dogs that threatened her family's struggling ranch. The Winchester .270 had belonged to her grandfather, then her father, and now rested naturally in her hands as if it had been crafted specifically for her grip. "Emily Grace Whitaker, you get those chores finished before you start target shooting." Her mother's voice carried across the fields, tinged with the same resignation that had colored their conversations since the bank notice arrived. Whitaker Ranch, 3,000 acres of rolling hills and stubborn dreams, was bleeding money faster than a gut-shot deer. Cattle prices had plummeted. The drought had lasted 2 years longer than anyone predicted, and the bank wanted answers her family didn't have. Emily lined up her shot on a prairie dog, poking its head above a distant mound, calculating wind, distance, and drop in the split second between breath and trigger pull. The crack of the rifle echoed across the valley. 800 yards away, the prairie dog disappeared. "Show off," muttered her younger brother Danny, appearing with a bucket of oats for the horses. At 16, Danny had inherited their father's broad shoulders and their mother's practical stubbornness, but he lacked Emily's supernatural ability with the rifle. "Dad wants to know if you're coming to town for the recruiter meeting," he said. Emily lowered her rifle, studying the distant hills where her shot had found its mark. "What recruiter meeting?" "Army sending someone to the high school. Graduation's next week and half the seniors don't have college money or job prospects." Danny's voice carried the same worried undertone that had plagued their household for months. "Mom thinks it might be worth hearing what they have to say." The idea of leaving Montana, of trading these endless skies and familiar mountains for military bases and foreign deserts, should have felt wrong. Instead, as Emily shouldered her rifle and followed Danny toward the house, she felt something she hadn't experienced in months: possibility. That evening, the Whitaker family gathered around their kitchen table, the same scarred oak surface where 3 generations had planned their futures and weathered their crisis. Emily's father, Thomas Whitaker, spread papers across the wood grain, his calloused hands moving between bank statements and foreclosure notices with practiced resignation. "The numbers don't lie," Thomas said quietly, his weathered face reflecting 45 years of Montana winters. "We've got maybe 6 months before the bank takes the ranch. I can pick up more shifts at the lumber mill, but it won't be enough." Emily's mother, Margaret, reached across to squeeze her husband's hand. At 42, Margaret Whitaker had the kind of quiet strength that came from raising children in hard country and making impossible budgets stretch to cover basic necessities. "We'll figure something out. We always do." "The Army's offering signing bonuses," Emily said suddenly, surprising herself with the words. "The recruiter said exceptional shooters can qualify for specialized programs with enhanced benefits." Thomas Whitaker looked up sharply. "Emily, you're 18 years old. You've never been further from home than Billings." "And I can outshoot every hunter in 3 counties, Emily replied, meeting her father's gaze steadily. "Grandpa taught me that skill is currency. Maybe it's time I spent some of mine." The silence stretched long enough for the grandfather clock in the hallway to chime 9 times. Finally, Margaret Whitaker spoke. "What kind of specialized programs?" Emily had spent the afternoon researching military sniper schools and marksmanship programs, her laptop balanced on her knees as she sat on the porch swing. Sniper training, Army Marksman Unit, Special Operations Support. She paused, choosing her words carefully. The kind of programs that come with substantial financial compensation and educational benefits. Danny leaned forward, his eyes bright with something between excitement and worry. "You mean like military sniper school? That's serious stuff, Emily." "I'm a serious shooter," Emily replied simply, "and serious problems require serious solutions." Thomas Whitaker pushed back from the table, walking to the window that overlooked the fields where 4 generations of his family had worked the land. "Your great-grandfather fought in World War II. Your grandfather served in Vietnam. I did 2 tours in Desert Storm." He turned back to face his daughter, his expression unreadable. "Military service changes you. It takes something from you even when it gives something back." "Maybe," Emily said quietly, "but sitting here watching the ranch die slowly is taking something from all of us." The recruitment meeting at Blackwater High School took place in the same gymnasium where Emily had played basketball for 4 years, where she'd graduated valedictorian 3 days earlier, where she'd given the speech about pursuing dreams despite obstacles. Sergeant First Class Frank Thompson stood behind a folding table covered with brochures and laptop computers, his Army dress uniform crisp despite the late spring heat. Thompson was perhaps 35, with the kind of controlled intensity that came from years of military precision. His presentation covered standard enlistment options, military occupational specialties, and educational benefits. But when Emily approached his table afterward carrying a folder of her shooting records and competition scores, his entire demeanor shifted. "These scores real?" Thompson asked, scanning the documentation Emily had compiled. 800-yard groups under 2 inches? Consistent hits at 1 mile and 200 yards with hunting rifles? Wind compensation calculations at this level? "Every score is witnessed and documented," Emily replied. "I can demonstrate if necessary." Thompson's eyes narrowed a bit. Narrowed with professional interest. "Ms. Whitaker, how much do you know about military sniper programs?" "I know they're looking for exceptional marksmen with the mental discipline to perform under extreme pressure. I know the Army Marksmanship Unit represents the pinnacle of military shooting sports. And I know that specialized programs come with specialized compensation." "They also come with specialized risks," Thompson said. "Seriously, sniper training isn't summer camp. It's designed to break people who think they're tough enough to handle anything. The dropout rate exceeds 70%. Emily met his gaze without flinching. Sergeant, I've been supporting my family's ranch since I was 12 years old. I put meat on our table through hunting since I was 14. I've won every shooting competition within 200 miles of here for the past 3 years. I don't break easily. Thompson studied her for a long moment, taking in her steady hands, her direct eye contact, and the quiet confidence that radiated from her small frame. At 5'6" and 130 pounds, Emily Whitaker didn't look like the typical military recruit, but something in her bearings suggested depths that weren't immediately visible. "Tell you what," Thompson said finally, "there's a qualifying shoot happening at Fort Harrison next week. Prospective candidates for advanced marksmanship programs. You show up with documented proof of your shooting abilities past the initial screening, and I'll personally ensure your application gets serious consideration." "What's the screening involve?" "Standard marksmanship evaluation at distances up to 800 meters, basic physical fitness requirements, psychological evaluation to assess suitability for high-stress military occupations." Thompson handed her a business card along with several recruitment packets. "Ms. Whitaker, I'll be honest with you. In 15 years of recruiting, I've never seen civilian shooting scores like yours from someone your age. But military sniping is about more than accuracy. It's about mental fortitude, emotional control, and the audacity to make life-or-death decisions under extreme pressure." Emily pocketed the business card and extended her hand for a firm handshake. "Sergeant Thompson, I appreciate your honesty, but I didn't drive 4 hours to Blackwater to hear about why I might not qualify. I came here to find out how to enlist." As Emily turned to leave, Thompson called after her, "One more thing, Whitaker. Your grandfather was Richard Whitaker, served in the European theater in World War II, correct?" Emily stopped, surprised. "Yes, how did you know that?" Thompson's expression revealed nothing. "Just making conversation. Military families interest me." The drive back to the ranch gave Emily 3 hours to contemplate the magnitude of what she was considering. The Montana landscape rolled past her pickup truck's windows, endless wheat fields, distant mountain ranges, and the kind of open space that made a person feel simultaneously infinite and insignificant. This was home, the only world she'd ever known, and leaving it would mean abandoning everything familiar. But staying would mean watching her family lose everything they'd built across 4 generations. Her phone buzzed with a text from her best friend Sarah Jenkins, who was heading to the University of Montana in the fall on a partial scholarship. "How did the military thing go? Still think you're crazy, but I support you're crazy?" Emily smiled, despite her churning thoughts. Sarah had been her closest friend since elementary school, the steady voice of reason to Emily's impulsive decisiveness. They'd spent countless hours together in the mountains, hiking and camping, with Sarah providing the practical planning, while Emily handled the hunting and outdoor survival aspects of their adventures. Another text appeared. "Seriously though, you're one of the smartest people I know. Military might be perfect for you, but just make sure you're doing it for the right reasons." The right reasons. Emily considered this as she turned onto the gravel road leading to her family's property. Was financial necessity the right reason? Was the desire to use her shooting skills professionally the right reason? Was the restless feeling that Montana, despite its beauty, was too small to contain her ambitions the right reason? Her grandfather's voice echoed in her memory. "Skill without purpose is just showing off, Emily, but skill applied to something important can change the world." The next morning, Emily woke before dawn, as was her habit, but instead of heading straight to the barn for chores, she found herself drawn to the old storage shed at the far edge of the property. The wooden structure had been built by her great-grandfather, and in recent years had been mainly used for storing old equipment and family keepsakes deemed too valuable to discard but not practical enough to keep in the house. Emily had always loved the musty, timeless smell of the place. As a child, she'd spent hours exploring its corners, discovering forgotten treasures from earlier generations of Whitakers. Now, with the possibility of leaving the ranch for military service, she felt a sudden need to reconnect with her family's history. The padlock was stiff with disuse, but the key still turned in the mechanism. Inside, dust motes danced in the beams of early morning light that filtered through the weathered planks. Emily moved carefully among stacked furniture, old trunks, and farm implements that hadn't been used in decades. In the back corner sat an old wooden chest she'd recognized as her grandfather's Richard Whitaker's military footlocker. She'd seen it before, but had never explored its contents. Today something drew her to it. The brass latch was tarnished, but opened easily under her touch. Inside lay neatly folded uniforms, medals in velvet cases, and a stack of letters tied with faded ribbon. But what caught Emily's eye was a leather-bound journal wedged against the side of the trunk. She pulled it free, noticing how the binding was worn smooth from handling. Opening it, she saw page after page of handwritten notes, diagrams, and calculations in her grandfather's distinctive script. As she leafed through the journal, she realized she was looking at detailed ballistic calculations, trajectory charts, and environmental adjustment tables far more sophisticated than anything she would have expected from a World War II veteran. Many of the notes referenced shooting positions and techniques she'd never heard of, despite her extensive reading on marksmanship. Her eyes widened at some of the formulas. Calculations for spin drift compensation at ranges beyond 1,000 yards, humidity density adjustments that weren't standard practice until decades later, and complex trigonometric functions accounting for firing at extreme angles. These were advanced concepts that even modern snipers struggled with, yet her grandfather had been working them out by hand in the 1940s. A yellowed newspaper clipping fell from between the pages. It showed a young man in uniform being decorated by a stern-looking officer. The caption read, "Tem. Richard Whitaker receives commendation for exceptional service, European Theater, 1944. The article mentioned only that Lieutenant Whitaker had provided crucial tactical support during a sensitive operation, with no specific details. Emily continued exploring the trunk and discovered a false bottom. Beneath it lay a folder marked "Classified" in faded red letters and a small metal box. The folder contained documents so old the typewritten text had begun to fade. She scanned the pages quickly, her eyes widening as she read. Lieutenant Richard Whitaker, designated marksman with the 2nd Ranger Battalion, is credited with the elimination of General Major Wilhelm Richter at a confirmed distance of 100 yards. This engagement, conducted on April 12, 1940, represents the longest confirmed sniper elimination in current military records. Due to the sensitive nature of the operation and potential intelligence implications, all details are classified top secret. No public recognition or official record of this achievement is to be maintained in standard military files. Emily's hands trembled. Her grandfather had been a military sniper, one who had set records, and no one in the family had ever mentioned this. She'd learned to shoot from him, spent countless hours with him on the ranch's improvised firing range, and he'd never once hinted at this history. The small metal box contained a worn brass compass and a condensed version of a U.S. Army survival manual. Set of dog tags. Engraved on the back of the compass was a simple message. True aim comes from the heart, not just the eye. R.W. Emily sat back on her heels, dust swirling around her in the half-light of the shed. She felt as though she'd discovered a secret passage in a house she thought she knew completely. Her grandfather, the gentle, patient man who had taught her to shoot prairie dogs and mule deer, had once used those same skills to change the course of history. As she carefully replaced the items, she noticed one more document tucked into a side pocket of the trunk. It was a medical report stamped "Confidential," detailing an unusual genetic test. The technical language was difficult to parse, but certain phrases jumped out now on abnormal ocular neural processing. enhanced visual spatial cognition, and genetic markers consistent with superior depth perception and temporal processing speed. A handwritten note at the bottom, signed by someone with the title Chief Medical Officer, read, "Subject demonstrates abilities consistent with previous cases in the Artemis program. Recommendation: continued monitoring of bloodline for potential reoccurrence of the genetic anomaly." Emily's mind raced. Was this talking about her grandfather? Some kind of special genetic trait that made him an exceptional marksman? And what was this Artemis program? Whatever it was, it seemed the military had been interested enough in her grandfather's abilities to conduct specialized genetic testing, something that would have been extraordinarily unusual for a World War II soldier. She carefully returned everything to its place, making sure to position items exactly as she'd found them. But she couldn't resist slipping the compass into her pocket. Something told her she might need its guidance in the days ahead. As she locked the shed behind her, Emily felt a strange mixture of pride, confusion, and determination. Her decision to pursue military marksmanship no longer seemed like merely a practical solution to her family's financial problems. It felt like she was following a path that had been waiting for her all along. A path her grandfather had walked before her, leaving silent markers for her to find when the time was right. The Fort Harrison qualifying shoot took place on a gray Tuesday morning in early June, with Emily arriving before dawn to find 23 other candidates already assembling their equipment. The group was predominantly male, mostly college-aged, with several obvious military brats who carried themselves with inherited confidence. Emily set up her shooting position, methodically arranging her gear with the same careful attention to detail she'd applied to ranch work for years. Her rifle was older than most of the competition's equipment, the same Winchester 270 she'd used for hunting, but she had modified and tuned it until every component performed flawlessly. "First time at one of these evaluations?" asked the shooter beside her, a tall redhead with expensive equipment and a slight Texas accent. "I'm Madison Walker, University of Texas ROC program." "Emily Whitaker," she replied, adjusting her scope's focus. "First time?" "Yes." Madison looked over Emily's rifle setup with barely concealed condescension. "Hunting rifle, huh? Interesting. Most of us are using precision target rifles for this kind of evaluation. That old 270 won't hold up past 600 yards against our match-grade equipment." "Most people aren't consistently hitting 800-yard targets with hunting rifles," Emily replied pleasantly, "but I suppose we'll see how everyone performs." The evaluation began with standard marksmanship tests at 200, 400, and 600 meters. Emily's shots grouped tightly at each distance, her technique drawing attention from the evaluating instructors. Master Sergeant James Crawford, a lean man in his 40s with the kind of weathered hands that spoke of decades handling weapons, began timing Emily's target acquisitions and noting her shooting positions. "Whitaker," Crawford called out after her 600-meter string, "you're shooting offhand stances I don't recognize from standard military training." "Self-taught technique, Sergeant. Hunting in Montana requires adapting to terrain and conditions that don't always accommodate textbook positions." Crawford made additional notes on his evaluation sheet. "Show me your 800-meter grouping." The 800-meter target stretched the abilities of several candidates. Emily watched Madison Walker struggle with wind compensation, saw 2 candidates fail to achieve acceptable accuracy, and noticed one shooter actually hit an adjacent target frame entirely. When her turn came, Emily settled into a prone position, checked her scope settings, and began her breathing routine. The first shot struck dead center. The second shot, adjusted for a wind change, hit less than an inch away. The third, fourth, and fifth shots created a group that could be covered with a quarter. "Jesus Christ," muttered one of the other candidates. "Did she just shoot a sub-MOA group at 800 meters with a hunting rifle?" Master Sergeant Crawford lowered his spotting scope and walked over to Emily's position. "Whitaker, Where did you learn to read wind at extended range? Hunting elk in mountain conditions, Emily replied, beginning to clean her rifle. Wind in the mountains changes constantly. You learn to read it or you go home empty-handed. And where did you learn to compensate for temperature and altitude variables? Emily paused her cleaning routine. Trial and error mostly, some internet research, lots of practice. She looked up at Crawford. Is that a problem, Sergeant? Crawford's expression was unreadable. Whitaker, what you just did doesn't happen by accident. Sub-minute of angle accuracy at 800 meters requires understanding of ballistics, atmospheric conditions, and rifle mechanics that most people don't develop without formal training. I had formal training, Emily said. My grandfather taught me to shoot when I was 8 years old. My father taught me to hunt when I was 12. Montana taught me everything else. Crawford studied her for a moment, his eyes narrowing slightly. Your grandfather was Richard Whitaker. Emily felt a chill run down her spine. Yes. Did you know him? No, Crawford said, a little too quickly, but I've heard the name. He moved on to the next shooter without further explanation. Madison Walker approached as Emily packed her equipment. That was unexpected, she admitted. Where did you learn to shoot like that? Family tradition, Emily replied, not wanting to elaborate further. Madison nodded slowly. Well, you've got skills, I'll give you that. But military sniping isn't just about hitting targets on a controlled range. It's about performing under pressure in hostile environments with armor, with lives at stake. I understand that. Do you? Madison's tone was challenging. Because I've been training for this my whole life. My father was force recon. My brother's a ranger. This isn't a hobby for me or a way to pay bills, it's my calling. Emily met the other woman's gaze steadily. We all have our reasons. Mine are my own. The psychological evaluation took place that afternoon in a sterile conference room where Emily faced 3 evaluators, a military psychologist, a veteran sniper instructor, and a medical officer. They asked questions about stress management, decision-making under pressure, and her motivations for pursuing military service. Ms. Whitaker, the psychologist began, sniper operations often involve extended periods of isolation, sometimes in hostile environments. How do you handle being alone? I spend most of my time alone, Emily answered honestly. Hunting, ranch work, target practice. I'm comfortable with my own company. Military sniping may require engaging human targets, the sniper instructor said bluntly. Have you considered the psychological implications of potentially taking a human life? Emily had expected this question and had spent considerable time thinking about her answer. I've been hunting since I was 12. I understand the finality of pulling a trigger and the responsibility that comes with taking a life. I also understand that some situations require difficult choices to protect innocent people. Financial support, and I have skills that align with military requirements, but beyond that, I want to serve something larger than myself. The evaluators exchanged glances. Miss Whitaker, the psychologist continued, you're remarkably composed for someone your age. Some might say unusually composed. Do you feel you relate well to your peers? Emily considered this carefully. I relate well to people who share my values, hard work, honesty, taking care of family. I don't relate as well to people who are satisfied with mediocrity or who avoid challenging themselves. Toward the end of the session, the medical officer asked a question that caught Emily off guard. Have you ever experienced unusual visual processing abilities? heightened perception of movement, or exceptional depth perception beyond normal human capability? Emily thought of the document she'd found in her grandfather's trunk with its references to abnormal ocular neural processing. Had they somehow known about this? Was this a standard question or something specifically targeted at her? "I'm not sure what you mean by unusual," she answered carefully. "I've always had good eyesight and spatial awareness. It helps with shooting." The officer made a note without commenting further. After 2 hours of questioning, Emily was dismissed, with instructions to wait for evaluation results. She spent the remainder of the afternoon in Great Falls, walking through the city's downtown area and marveling at the number of people crowded into relatively small spaces. After years of Montana's vast emptiness, even a modest city felt overwhelming and claustrophobic. Her phone rang as she sat in a diner picking at a hamburger while watching traffic pass outside the window. "Emily, it's Sergeant Thompson from the recruitment office." His voice carried a note of excitement. "I just received your evaluation results from Fort Harrison." Emily's pulse quickened. "And Whitaker, in 15 years of coordinating these evaluations, I've never seen scores like yours. You didn't just qualify for advanced marksmanship programs, you shattered the evaluation standards." Thompson paused. "There are people at Fort Benning who want to meet you immediately." Fort Benning? Georgia, home of the Army Marksmanship Unit and Advanced Sniper Training Programs. They're offering you immediate acceptance into the most selective shooting program in the military with a signing bonus that would make your head spin. Emily closed her eyes, feeling the weight of decisions settling on her shoulders. "What kind of timeline are we talking about?" "Basic training starts in 6 weeks. If you accept, you'd ship out for Fort Benning immediately after completion. The whole process takes about 8 months before you're assigned to an operational unit. 8 months to transform from Montana ranch girl to military sniper? 8 months to develop skills that could support her family and serve her country. 8 months to discover if her natural abilities could translate to professional excellence. Sergeant Thompson, I'll need to discuss this with my family, but I'm very interested. Whitaker, one more thing. The evaluation team noted something unusual about your shooting style. They said you seem to intuitively understand ballistic principles that take most people years to learn. Don't let anyone convince you that's not valuable." Emily hesitated, then asked the question that had been burning in her mind since her discovery in the storage shed. "Sergeant, is there anything in the Army called the Artemis Abro?" A long silence followed. Then Thompson's voice suddenly cautious. "Where did you hear that name?" "I found it in some old papers of my grandfather's. Richard Whitaker. He served in World War I." Another pause. "Whitaker? That's not something I have clearance to discuss over an unsecured line. But if you're asking what I think you're asking, let's just say certain talents run in families, and the Army has always been interested in those talents. Was my grandfather a sniper in World War II? I honestly don't know the details, but I can tell you that during your evaluation, someone ran your name through a database and flagged your file. That's why Fort Benning responded so quickly. That's all I can say." After hanging up, Emily sat on the porch swing at home, turning her grandfather's compass over and over in her hands. The morning sun caught the brass, sending glints of light dancing across the weathered wood of the porch. The engraving stared up at her. True aim comes from the heart, not just the eye. She hadn't told her parents about what she'd found in the storage shed. Something told her that if her grandfather had wanted them to know about his military history, he would have shared it himself. But now, with her own military career about to begin, she couldn't help wondering what other secrets might be waiting for her to discover. The day after graduation, Emily was summoned to a meeting that would change the course of her military career. In a windowless conference room deep within Fort Benning's administrative complex, she found herself facing Colonel James Hayes, a silver-haired officer whose chest bore the badges of Special Forces Ranger and other elite qualifications Emily didn't recognize. "Private Whitaker," Hayes began, without preamble, "what do you know about your grandfather's military service?" Emily's pulse quickened. "Not much, sir. I know he served in World War I. Recently I found some documents suggesting he might have been a sniper." Hayes nodded slowly. "Richard Whitaker wasn't just a sniper. He was part of a highly classified program that identified and developed individuals with unusual aptitudes for precision shooting." He slid a folder across the table. Inside was a black and white photograph of a group of soldiers standing before a target range. In the center stood a younger version of her grandfather holding a rifle that looked remarkably similar to the Winchester 270 Emily now possessed. "The Artemis program began in 1943. Hayes continued. "Military scientists had identified a rare genetic variation that affected visual processing, proprioception, and temporal cognition. In layman's terms, people with this genetic marker processed visual information differently, faster, more accurately, with an intuitive understanding of ballistic physics that couldn't be taught." Emily stared at the photograph, pieces falling into place. "And my grandfather had this marker? He was one of the first identified. The program was named after Artemis, the Greek goddess of the hunt, known for never missing her target." Hayes gestured to the folder. "Turn to the next page." Emily found a document detailing shooting results from 1944. Her grandfather's name topped the list with a confirmed shot at 100 yards, but someone had handwritten a note in the margin. "Actual 1,750-yard, security classification Umbra 1,750-yard." Emily looked up shocked. "In 1944? With World War II-era equipment?" Hayes nodded. "It was classified at the highest levels. The official record remained 100 yards for decades. Your grandfather eliminated a high-ranking Nazi officer who was coordinating reinforcements for the Atlantic Wall defenses before D-Day. That shot, from a technical perspective, shouldn't have been possible with the technology of the time, and no one knew. A handful of people at the highest levels before pulling the trigger. How she could sense changes in wind direction that others couldn't perceive. How distances and angles just made sense to her in ways she couldn't explain. "So, what happens now?" she asked. "Now you have a choice," Hayes said. "You can proceed with standard advanced sniper training, you'll excel, no doubt, at, or you can enter a specialized program designed specifically for individuals with your abilities. It's more demanding, more classified, and far more consequential in terms of eventual deployment options." "What's the program called?" Hayes smiled slightly. "Officially, it doesn't exist. Unofficially, we still call it Artemis. How many people like me are there? Currently, active, 7, including you. The genetic marker appears in approximately 1 in 5 million individuals. Most never discover their potential because they never engage in activities that would reveal it. Some become exceptional athletes or surgeons, their abilities channeled into other precision skills. But those who find their way to marksmanship," Hayes shook his head with something like wonder. "They change history, usually without anyone knowing." Emily studied the photos of her grandfather and the other original Artemis participants. Did my grandfather know what he was part of? That he was being studied initially? No. The first participants were identified through exceptional performance and then studied without their knowledge. By 1944, the program became more formalized and participants were informed to a degree. Your grandfather knew he was part of something special, but I doubt he understood the full scope of the genetic research. And my father? Does he carry this marker? No. The genetics are complex, and the marker doesn't follow simple hereditary patterns. It can skip generations or emerge unexpectedly in family lines. Your father was tested, of course, but showed no signs of the ability. Emily absorbed this information slowly, trying to process its implications. And if I join this program, what exactly would I be agreeing to? BACS. Specialized training far beyond standard sniper school. Deployment for missions of extraordinary strategic importance. Complete secrecy about your abilities and achievements. And, Hayes hesitated, monitoring of your own future children for the marker. Emily felt a chill at the clinical way Hayes discussed her potential children as subjects for monitoring. And if I refuse? Then you proceed with standard training. You'll still be an exceptional sniper, probably one of the best in conventional forces. The signing bonus and benefits remain the same, but you'll never deploy on the missions that truly utilize your full potential. And frankly, we'd still monitor your children regardless. This ability is too rare and too valuable to ignore. Emily thought of the ranch, of her family's financial struggles, of her grandfather's hidden legacy. She thought of the compass in her pocket, its inscription guiding her. True aim comes from the heart, not just the eye. I need time to think, she said finally. Hayes nodded. 24 hours. That's all I can give you. The next Artemis training cycle begins tomorrow. Basic training at Fort Benning was designed to break down civilian habits and rebuild recruits as soldiers. For most of Emily's fellow trainees, the experience was a brutal introduction to military discipline, physical demands, and mental pressure. For Emily, it felt like an intensive course in skills she'd been developing unconsciously for years. The physical training challenged her in new ways. She'd always been fit, from ranch work, but military fitness required different muscle groups and endurance patterns. The academic requirements covered topics she'd never studied formally, but understood intuitively: ballistics, weather pattern recognition, and equipment maintenance. But it was during weapons training that Emily truly distinguished herself. "Whitaker, step up to the firing line," barked Drill Sergeant Patricia Vegas, a compact woman whose intensity made up for what she lacked in height. "Let's see if Montana farm girls can hang with real soldiers." Emily approached the firing line carrying the standard M4 carbine, a weapon significantly different from her familiar Winchester, but operating on the same fundamental principles. Around her fellow recruits struggled with basic marksmanship concepts, fighting their weapons instead of working with them. The target stood at 300 meters of distance, Emily considered practically point-blank range. She settled into a stable shooting position, adjusted for the slight crosswind, and began engaging targets with mechanical precision. "Cease fire!" Sergeant Vegas called after Emily had emptied her magazine. "Whitaker, center your rifle and step back." The scoring process took longer than usual, with instructors gathering at the scoring table. Emily had achieved perfect scores at a distance where many recruits struggled to hit the target at all. "Whitaker," Sergeant Vegas said, her voice carefully neutral. "Have you fired military weapons before?" "No, Sergeant. First time." "Then explain how you just shot expert marksman scores on your first military qualification." Emily considered her answer carefully. "Sergeant, the principles are the same regardless of the weapon: sight alignment, breathing control, trigger pull, and follow-through. The M4 just applies those principles with different specifications." Word of Emily's shooting ability spread quickly through the training battalion. By the end of her first week, instructors from advanced programs were reviewing her scores and requesting additional evaluations. Emily found herself caught between the standard recruit training schedule and special assessments designed to measure her potential for specialized programs. "Whitaker, you're drawing attention," said Private Jessica Chen, her bunkmate and one of the few other recruits who seemed genuinely comfortable with military life. Jessica was a 20-year-old from California whose father had served in the Marine Corps. Good attention, but attention nonetheless. "Is that a problem?" Emily asked, stripping her rifle for the third time that evening to ensure perfect cleanliness. "Depends on how you handle it, Chen. Some people resent recruits who stand out. Others respect exceptional performance. The trick is proving you're exceptional without making everyone else feel inadequate." Emily looked up from her weapons maintenance. "I'm not trying to make anyone feel anything. I'm just doing my best." "I know," Jessica said with a slight smile. "That's what makes it work." The advanced marksmanship evaluation came during Emily's 6th week of basic training. Instead of the standard training range, she found herself at a specialized facility with distances extending beyond anything she had experienced in civilian life. The evaluating team included Master Sergeant Crawford, whom she remembered from Fort Harrison, along with several instructors she didn't recognize. "Whitaker," to Crawford, Bia. "Today's evaluation will test your abilities at distances up to 1,200 meters using precision rifle systems. You'll be evaluated on accuracy, target acquisition, speed, and adaptability to unfamiliar equipment." The precision rifle system was a custom .308 system with an advanced scope and bipod, significantly heavier and more complex than anything Emily had used previously. She spent 30 minutes familiarizing herself with the weapon's feel and function, then settled into position for the longest shots of her military career. The first target stood at 800 meters, familiar territory. Emily's shots grouped within 2 inches of center. The second target at 1,000 meters required adjustments for wind and elevation she'd never attempted with military equipment. Her first shot missed left by 6 inches. Her second shot, corrected for wind, struck center mass. Her remaining shots created a group that impressed even the veteran instructors. "Whitaker, step up to the 1,200-meter line," Crawford instructed. 1,200 meters was beyond anything Emily had attempted, even in civilian competition. She studied the target through her scope, calculating wind patterns and bullet drop, using principles she'd learned through years of practice, but had never applied at such extreme range. Her first shot struck the target 8 inches high. Her second shot, adjusted for drop, hit 4 inches left of center. Her third shot found the bullseye. "Time!" Crawford called out. "Whitaker, center your rifle and step back." The scoring process took longer than usual, with instructors solely using spotting scopes to verify hit locations and measurements. When Crawford approached Emily with the results, his expression was carefully controlled. "Whitaker, your 1 kilometer 200-meter group measured 11 inches. For perspective, that's within acceptable combat accuracy at a distance where most experienced military marksmen struggle to hit the target consistently." Emily felt a surge of satisfaction mixed with anticipation. "What's next, Sergeant?" "Next, you complete basic training like every other recruit, but after graduation, you'll be reporting directly to the Special Operations Training or Course for Advanced Sniper Instruction." Crawford studied her intently. "Whitaker, understand that what comes next will be more challenging than anything you've experienced. The training is designed to push candidates beyond their perceived limitations." "I understand, Sergeant." "Do you? Because once you enter Special Operations Training, failure isn't just poor performance, it's potentially life-threatening. The skills you'll learn are intended for combat application against enemy forces who are trying to kill you." Emily met his gaze without wavering. "Sergeant, I've spent my entire life preparing for challenges that matter. I'm ready for whatever comes next." The remainder of basic training passed in a blur of standard military instruction, punctuated by additional evaluations in specialized training modules. Emily excelled in all areas, but her marksmanship scores became legendary among the training staff. By graduation day, she held the highest shooting scores in her battalion's history. Her family made the trip to Fort Benning for the graduation ceremony, driving 18 hours from Montana to witness Emily receive her military credentials. Seeing her parents in the crowd of families, Emily felt the full weight of what she was undertaking. This wasn't just career training, it was a fundamental transformation of her life's direction. "We're proud of you," Margaret Whitaker said during the brief family visit aloud after the ceremony. "But we're also scared for you." "I'm scared too," Emily admitted. "But I'm more excited than scared." Thomas Whitaker handed his daughter a small package wrapped in brown paper. "From your grandfather's military footlocker. He wanted you to have it when you were ready." Inside the package was a compass, brass and worn smooth by decades of use, with an inscription on the back. "For Emily May, you always find your way home." "Grandpa knew?" Emily asked, her voice tight with emotion. "He said you had the heart of a soldier from the time you were little," Thomas replied. "Said you'd find your way to service eventually." As Emily hugged her parents goodbye, she felt the weight of two paths before her: the standard path of military excellence or the shadowy classified world of the Artemis program. By this time tomorrow, she would have to choose which legacy of her grandfather's to follow. And as she watched her family drive away, Emily realized that no matter which path she chose, she had already crossed a threshold into a world her grandfather had navigated decades before. A world where extraordinary ability carried extraordinary responsibility, and where history could be changed with a single bullet. The Special Operations Training course began 2 weeks after basic training graduation, and Emily immediately understood why the failure rate was so high. The course combined advanced marksmanship instruction with survival training, tactical planning, and psychological conditioning designed to simulate combat stress. Her fellow candidates included experienced soldiers seeking advancement, college graduates with military science degrees, and a few exceptional recruits like herself. The diversity of backgrounds created a competitive environment where everyone fought to prove their capabilities. "Welcome to the big leagues, farm girl," said Staff Sergeant Victor Reyes, a tough-talking candidate from Los Angeles who'd served 2 combat tours before applying for sniper training. "Hope you're ready for some real shooting." Emily didn't respond to the provocation, focusing instead on the instructor's briefing about advanced ballistic calculations and environmental factors affecting long-range accuracy. The technical aspects of military sniping proved more complex than her self-taught methods, but the underlying principles felt familiar. The first week covered theoretical foundations, ballistic science, weather pattern recognition, and target identification. Emily discovered that her intuitive understanding of these concepts gave her a significant advantage, allowing her to focus on military-specific applications while other candidates struggled with basic principles. The second week introduced practical applications at ranges up to 1,500 meters. Emily's performance continued to exceed expectations, though she began to understand the social dynamics that came with consistent excellence. Some candidates respected her abilities and sought her guidance. Others resented what they perceived as effortless success. "Whitaker, word of advice," said Captain Lisa Rodriguez, the lead marksmanship instructor, after a particularly impressive shooting session. "Excellence can be isolating if you're not careful. Don't let pursuit of perfection interfere with team building." "I'm not trying to isolate myself, ma'am," Emily replied. "I'm just trying to perform to the best of my abilities." "I understand that, but remember that military operations are team endeavors. Individual excellence means nothing if it doesn't contribute to collective success." The advice proved prophetic during the third week's team exercises. Candidates paired for 2-person sniper teams, with 1 shooter and 1 spotter working together to engage targets at unknown distances under time pressure. Emily was paired with Marcus Webb, a quiet candidate from Ohio with strong technical skills but inconsistent shooting performance. "Whitaker, I know I'm not as good a shot as you," Webb said, "but I'm excellent at range estimation and wind reading. If you can trust my calculations, I think we can perform well together." The partnership proved remarkably effective. Webb's analytical approach to environmental factors complemented Emily's instinctive shooting abilities, creating a team dynamic that produced consistently exceptional results. Their success began changing Emily's relationship with her fellow candidates, transforming her from isolated prodigy to valuable team member. "See," Captain Rodriguez observed after their fourth successful team exercise, "excellence shared is excellence multiplied." The night before the fourth week's training was set to begin, Emily was working late in the armory, meticulously cleaning her assigned weapon. The building was nearly empty, most trainees having retired to their quarters for the evening. The metallic smell of gun oil and the rhythmic motion of the cleaning rod brought a sense of calm after the day's intensive drills. The door opened, and Emily looked up to see David Harris, a fellow trainee who had made his disdain for her from the first day. Harris was a former college athlete from Georgia with family connections in the military and a sense of entitlement that set Emily's teeth on edge. "Working late, Whitaker." Harris's voice carried a false casualness that immediately put Emily on alert. "Just finishing up," she replied, continuing her work without breaking rhythm. Harris moved closer, leaning against the workbench beside her. "Must be nice having everything come so easily. The rest of us are busting our asses while you're breaking records without breaking a sweat." Emily didn't look up. "Nothing about this is easy, Harris. I work as hard as anyone else." "Sure you do." His tone dripped with sarcasm. "That's why Captain Rodriguez can't stop singing your praises. That's why Colonel Hayes himself shows up to watch you shoot." He leaned closer. "You know what I think? I think there's something else going on. Nobody gets the kind of attention you're getting without connections." Emily set down her cleaning rod and faced him directly. "I don't have connections. I have skills." Harris laughed, a short, ugly sound. "Skills, right? And I'm sure it has nothing to do with the fact that the Army is desperate to showcase female snipers for their diversity programs. It's all about your amazing skills." Emily felt her temper rising, but kept her voice level. "My scores speak for themselves." "For now," Harris said, pushing away from the bench. "But eventually, everyone shows their true limits, even prodigies." He headed for the door, then paused. "Sleep tight, Whitaker. Tomorrow's a big day." Something in his tone made Emily uneasy. After he left, she finished cleaning her weapon, then carefully inspected all her equipment, checking for any signs of tampering. Everything appeared normal, but a sense of foreboding followed her back to her quarters. The fourth week introduced combat stress simulation, engaging targets while under physical and psychological pressure designed to replicate battlefield conditions. Emily discovered that her years of hunting in challenging Montana weather had prepared her well for performing under adverse conditions. The first exercise of the week involved a long-range engagement after a strenuous 10-mile hike with full gear. Emily and Webb reached their designated shooting position, exhausted but focused. As Emily set up her rifle, she noticed something wasn't right. The scope's adjustment dials felt different, minutely off from where she left them. "Webb," she whispered, "check my scope. I think someone's been messing with it." Webb examined the equipment with narrowed eyes. "The elevation's been altered by half a minute of angle. The windage, too. It's subtle, wouldn't be noticeable unless you were intimately familiar with your setup." Emily immediately thought of Harris's veiled threat from the night before. "Can we fix it?" "Yes, but we don't have time to recalibrate properly before the exercise starts." Emily nodded. "I'll compensate manually." When the exercise began, Emily found herself making mental adjustments for the tampered scope settings with each shot. Despite the sabotage, she hit every target, though her groups weren't as tight as usual. After completing the course, she reported the tampering to Captain Rodriguez, who launched an immediate investigation. Security footage revealed Harris accessing the equipment locker during unauthorized hours. When confronted, he became defensive. "Women don't belong in special operations," he spat, "especially not teenage girls playing soldier." "That teenage girl outshot you with tampered equipment," Rodriguez pointed out coldly. "You're done here, Harris. Report to the command sergeant major for disciplinary action." As Harris was escorted away, he turned to Emily with undisguised contempt. "You think this is just about me? There are plenty of people in this program who don't want you here. I'm just the one who got caught." Later that evening, Staff Sergeant Rico Martinez, who had been observing the evaluations, found Emily cleaning her weapon in the armory. "Whitaker, I saw what happened today," he said, taking a seat beside her. "You should know that Harris isn't entirely wrong. There are elements within the military that resist change, especially when it comes to women in combat roles." Emily continued methodically cleaning her weapon. "With respect, Sergeant, I don't particularly care what those elements think. My scores speak for themselves." "They do, but be prepared. This won't be the last time someone tries to undermine you." Martinez studied her for a moment. "How did you know your scope had been tampered with? The adjustments were minute. Our investigation showed shifts of less than half a minute of angle." Emily paused, considering her answer carefully. She wasn't ready to discuss the Aramis program or her apparent genetic advantages. "I just noticed it felt wrong when I looked through it. Something about the sight picture didn't match what I was expecting." Martinez nodded slowly, clearly not entirely satisfied with her explanation, but unwilling to press further. "Well, however you noticed it, you handled the situation perfectly. Exceptional shooters sometimes develop a sixth sense about their equipment." He hesitated, then added, "You've been assigned to my team for deployment, Webb as well. The three of us will deploy to Afghanistan in 3 weeks." Emily felt a surge of both excitement and apprehension. "Afghanistan, Coast Province Forward Operating Base Chapman. It's active, one of the most contested regions along the Pakistan border. You'll be providing overwatch for patrols and possibly engaging high-value targets." The reality of deployment suddenly felt very immediate. In less than a month, she would be putting her skills to use in actual combat, with lives depending on her accuracy. "Thank you for telling me, Sergeant." Martinez stood to leave, then paused. "Whitaker, one more thing. Whatever made you special back on that ranch in Montana, that's what got you here. Don't lose it trying to become what you think a soldier should be." The final evaluation combined all previous training elements into a comprehensive test of sniper capabilities. Candidates would engage multiple targets at unknown ranges while receiving indirect fire simulation, working in two-person teams under time constraints that mimicked combat urgency. Emily and Webb drew the most challenging scenario: targets at ranges from 600 to 1,400 meters, wind gusting to 35 knots in simulated enemy fire, requiring frequent position changes. As they settled into their initial shooting position, Emily felt the familiar calm that descended when she truly focused on marksmanship. "Range to primary target," Emily asked, settling behind her rifle. Webb studied the distant target through his spotting scope, calculating environmental factors with practiced precision. 1,100 meters. Wind, east-northeast at 28 knots, gusting to 35 knots. Temperature differential indicates bullet will drop approximately 18 inches below point of aim. Emily adjusted her scope and found her target through the reticle. The simulation began with artificial explosions and chaos designed to create stress and distraction. Through it all, Emily maintained her focus, engaging targets with mechanical precision while Webb called corrections and confirmed hits. "Target down," Webb confirmed after Emily shot at the 1,400-meter target. "Whitaker, that was perfect compensation for wind and elevation." They completed the exercise with perfect scores on all 6 targets, establishing a new course record for accuracy and time. As they packed their equipment, Emily realized she had found something she hadn't expected in the military: a partnership based on mutual respect and complementary skills. The graduation ceremony for the Special Operations Training course was smaller and more subdued than basic training graduation. Only 8 candidates had successfully completed the program, and Emily was the youngest graduate by 3 years. She was also the only woman and the only candidate who'd entered the program directly from civilian life. Whitaker, Master Sergeant Crawford approached her after the ceremony carrying an official-looking folder. Your final scores broke multiple course records. Long-range accuracy, environmental adaptation, and team performance all exceeded previous benchmarks. Emily accepted the folder containing her certification documents and next assignment orders. Thank you, Sergeant. Where am I being deployed? Crawford's expression grew serious. Afghanistan. Forward Operating Base Chapman, in Coast Province. You'll be attached to an experienced sniper team for your first operational deployment. He paused, studying her reaction. Whitaker, training is over. What comes next is real-world application of everything you've learned, with consequences that extend far beyond course grades. I understand, Sergeant. To you, because your partner, Marcus Webb, will be deploying with you, along with Staff Sergeant Rico Martinez as team leader. The three of you will be responsible for providing precision fire support in one of the most active combat zones in Afghanistan. Emily felt a mixture of excitement and apprehension. After months of training for this moment, the reality of combat deployment carried weight that no simulation could replicate. When do we deploy? 2 weeks. Use the time to settle your personal affairs and prepare mentally for extended combat operations. Crawford handed her another document. Your family has been notified of your deployment status. Your binding sonus has been transferred to the account you specified. That evening, Emily called home from the base phone center, speaking with her parents for the first time since beginning specialized training. The conversation was both celebratory and somber, acknowledging her success while recognizing the dangers inherent in her upcoming deployment. The bank called yesterday, Thomas Whitaker reported. They've agreed to restructure the ranch loan based on your military income and signing bonus. We're going to keep the ranch, Emily. I'm glad, Emily replied, though her voice carried undertones of uncertainty about what lay ahead. How's Danny handling everything? Your brother's proud of you, but he's worried. We all are. Margaret Whitaker's voice joined the conversation. Emily, promise us you'll be careful over there? I promise, Mom. I've had the best training available, and I'll be working with experienced soldiers who know how to operate safely in combat zones. We love you, Thomas Whitaker said simply. Come home safe. The flight to Afghanistan took Emily Whitaker across more distance than she'd traveled in her entire life, from the familiar mountains of Montana to the alien landscape of Central Asia. As the military transport aircraft descended toward Bagram Airfield, Emily pressed her face to the small window and watched a country at war roll past below. Brown mountains, scattered compounds, and the occasional wisp of smoke that might have been cooking fires or something more ominous. First deployment? Asked the soldier sitting across from her, a sergeant from the 82nd Airborne with 3 deployment patches on his sleeve. Yes, Emily replied, still watching the landscape. 4th time in country for me. Word of advice. Afghanistan will teach you things about yourself you never knew existed. Some good, some not so good. The temperature at Bagram hit Emily like opening an oven door, intense heat that immediately made her Montana-accustomed lungs work harder. The air smelled of dust, diesel fuel, and something else she couldn't identify, but would later learn was the perpetual scent of a country where ancient traditions collided with modern warfare. Staff Sergeant Martinez met Emily and Webb at the Arrival Processing Center, his uniform already showing the dust and wear that marked experienced, deployed soldiers. Welcome to the sandbox, he said, shouldering his pack. Transport to Chapman leaves in 30 minutes. Use the time to hydrate and do final gear checks. The helicopter flight to Forward Operating Base Chapman took them over terrain that appeared both beautiful and threatening. Jagged mountains rose in every direction, their peaks disappearing into haze, while their slopes showed evidence of centuries of human habitation, terraced fields, stone villages, and paths that wound between valleys like ancient rivers. Population down there is mostly Pashtun tribal groups, Martinez explained over the helicopter's engine noise. Some support the government, Some support the Taliban. Most just want to be left alone to tend their farms and raise their families. Our job is to distinguish between legitimate threats and civilians trying to survive in a war zone. FOB Chapman occupied a strategic position in the Coast Province, providing overwatch for major supply routes and serving as a staging area for operations against Taliban and al-Qaeda forces operating in the mountainous border region with Pakistan. The base was larger than Emily had expected, but smaller than she had hoped. Perhaps 200 soldiers living in a collection of temporary buildings surrounded by concrete barriers and razor wire. "Home sweet home," Webb muttered as they walked through the base's main gate. "Not exactly Montana, is it, Whitaker?" Emily surveyed their new environment with the analytical eye she'd developed during years of hunting in varied terrain. The base was well positioned for defense, but vulnerable to indirect fire from the surrounding mountains. The living conditions were basic but functional. Most importantly, the weapons and communication systems appeared well maintained and professionally operated. "It'll do," she replied simply. Their quarters consisted of a modified shipping container divided into 3 sleeping areas, with a common space for equipment, maintenance, and mission planning. Emily claimed the bunk nearest the entrance, a habit from ranch life, where she'd always positioned herself between her family and potential threats. "Whitaker, Webb, settle in and report to the Tactical Operations Center in 1 hour," Martinez instructed. "We'll receive our first mission briefing and meet the infantry unit we'll be supporting." The TOC was a climate-controlled trailer filled with communications equipment, computer workstations, and map displays showing the current tactical situation throughout their area of operations. Major Patricia Stone, the base commander, briefed them on recent enemy activity and ongoing operations. "Intelligence indicates increased Taliban movement in grid squares 847 and 851, Major Stone began, pointing to areas on the digital map display. "They're likely establishing supply caches for winter operations and recruiting fighters from local villages. Your team will provide overwatch for patrol operations designed to disrupt these activities." Emily studied the terrain features on the map, noting elevation changes, sight lines, and potential shooting positions. The area was mountainous, with sparse vegetation, challenging for concealment, but excellent for long-range engagements. "Ma'am, what's the typical engagement range in this area?" Emily asked. "Highly variable. Taliban forces prefer close-range ambushes, using the terrain for concealment, but they'll also engage at longer ranges when they have positional advantages." Major Stone highlighted several locations on the map. "These ridgelines have been used for previous sniper attacks against our patrols." Staff Sergeant Martinez stepped forward. "Major, how current is our intelligence about enemy sniper capabilities?" "Current enough to be concerned. We've identified at least 3 Taliban marksmen in this area with confirmed kills beyond 600 meters. They're using a combination of Soviet-era rifles and more modern weapons acquired from various sources." The briefing continued with details about friendly force movements, communication protocols, and rules of engagement specific to the area's complex political and cultural environment. Emily learned that effective operations required understanding not just military tactics, but also tribal relationships, religious considerations, and economic factors that influence local support for various factions. Their first mission launched before dawn the following morning. Emily and her team would provide overwatch for a patrol investigating reports of weapons caches in a village called Ka, located in a valley surrounded by ridgelines that offered excellent fields of fire. "Whitaker, your shooting position will be on Hill 472, Martinez explained as they studied the approach route. 800 meters from the village center, clear sight lines to all major buildings and approaches. Webb will spot and coordinate with the patrol leader." Emily felt the familiar calm that preceded challenging shots. This was what months of training had prepared her for, real-world application of marksmanship skills with genuine consequences for success or failure. The patrol consisted of 12 soldiers from the 173rd Airborne, led by Lieutenant Cameron Foster, a competent 24-year-old on his second deployment. Foster's approached the operation's balanced, aggressive tactics with careful risk assessment, and his soldiers displayed the kind of professional competence Emily had learned to recognize during training. "Whitaker, understand that once we're in the village, you're our insurance policy," Foster explained during the final briefing. "If we encounter resistance, your job is to eliminate threats that our ground forces can't handle safely." "Understood, sir." What are the priority targets if contact is initiated? Anyone with weapons who poses a threat to the patrol. But remember, this is a complex environment where not everyone with a weapon is necessarily hostile. Positive target identification is critical. The approach to Hill 472 required a 3-hour movement through terrain that reminded Emily of Montana's mountains, but with crucial differences. The vegetation was sparser, the rock formations more jagged, and the air carried sounds and smells that spoke of human presence in ways that American wilderness never did. Emily established her shooting position with methodical care, arranging her equipment to provide stable firing platforms while maintaining concealment from observation. The customized M1010 rifle she'd been issued was significantly more sophisticated than her private OM Remington. It certainly had more customization than she had ever dreamed of.